Hello, everybody. Good morning to those of you joining us here in Kathmandu, in Nepal. It's 2030 Insight Live, and an especially big hello if you're tuning in or catching up. I'm Ollie Barrett, and it's an honor to be co-hosting this year's event, having seen so many of you in Dubai and Singapore and Mexico City. This is a session that many of us have been looking forward to, towards a global summit on eye health. All will be revealed. In fact, for those of you with us this morning, you'll have heard Peter Holland speaking about the power of summits to bring people together, to galvanize action, to secure commitments, and many other good things. So it's going to work in sort of three parts, if that's okay. Most importantly of all, we've got time for questions and reflections from you in the room and from you at home or around the world as well. So that's the crucial thing to say. I'm joined on stage by four, I don't think it's a technical term, but keynote listeners. That's what I'm going to say, and we will hear your voices as well. But you're on stage because I'm relying on you, we're relying on you to give us your freshest reflections on what you hear, especially from our first speaker. So I'll introduce our first speaker momentarily, but just to say, after we've had that reflection, I'll be joined by some leaders who need very little introduction, but who have been shaping aspects of a summit, and we can ask them anything. And crucially, and now I'm talking about colleagues already in the room with us, including Fiona Lawless, Amanda Davis, Katie Overby, Ella Goodwin. They'll be answering the question, how can I get involved? That's the question to them. Right, let me tell you who's on stage with us. Jonathan Craig, welcome Jonathan, an advocate of eye health, somebody with lived experience, a policy and advocacy manager at Vision 2020 in Australia. Welcome to you, Jonathan. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Next to you is Anna Tan, wearing a stunning outfit, I gather, acquired in Mexico itself. Thank you, Anna, for being with us. Anna is the Director of Global Eye Health for the Singapore National Eye Centre. Certainly an advocate for the visually impaired, also women in ophthalmology and young ophthalmologists as well. And in that sense, very much a representative of the profession. Thank you very much, Anna, for being with us. Caio Abujamra is the executive and also entrepreneur in residence in visual health in Brazil. Bom dia, very warm welcome to you, Caio. I note as well that you are president of the Suel Abujamra Institute, but you're also a former, and I think forever, young systems leader. So congratulations to you, Caio. You're a representative, in a sense, and very much actually, of hospitals and service providers. So thank you. Anil Gorkli is the country director of the Eyecare Foundation of Nepal. So thank you to you and colleagues for hosting us. And of course, you represent many things, including not-for-profits. Let's give them all a warm welcome. Standing by. So let's introduce somebody who I've absolutely loved spending time with over the past couple of days. I jokingly said they're the Sherpa Tenzing, but what I mean will become very clear. Because over 3 decades, Sarah Beeching has been elevating development priorities to the very highest political levels, not just in the UK, where she spends some of her time, but around the world. Let's have some examples. Sarah has worked with the UK government, she's worked with the World Bank, she's worked with several UN Secretary Generals, she's worked with the WHO, and a whole host of philanthropic organizations as well. She's the founder of Ocean Partnership, and to the point of this session, she has delivered and helped to deliver a lot of summits. I think it's fair to say, Sarah, on a whole variety of themes as well, as we'll hear on education, on health, on nutrition, on climate, on economic issues. And so, drawing on that experience, we've asked Sarah to tell us how to guarantee a successful summit. There's a brilliant line in the musical Hamilton, I want to be in the room where it happens. Well, honoured guests, Sarah Beeching has been in the room where it happened many, many times. Honoured guests, Sarah Beeching.
Thank you, Ollie, and thank you all. Namaste. It's such a huge honour and pleasure to be with you today. So, how can we guarantee a successful summit? It's a lovely idea. Guaranteed success always is. Come on, it can't be that difficult. Choose a cause, come up with a slogan, pop in some high-profile people and some other notables into a room with lights and lecterns and screens. Get them to agree on a few bits and bobs, sign something that's somehow meaningful to someone, somewhere, at some time, produce photo ops, accords, commitments, pledges, resolutions, and a cascade pack with lots of nice photographs in it. We all know, or I think at least suspect, that that's not a success. Truth is, you can't guarantee a successful summit. But what you can do is take a number of steps that ensure that your summit is successful as possible. However, before we ascertain what success looks like, let's start with thinking about what a summit is. A meeting, an epiphany for a cause, an event set up because people have run out of ideas of how to progress their campaign. In diplomatic language, a summit is used to indicate that we heads of state and government will probably attend, and other leaders across the sector. There'll be aspirations for a negotiated statement, or more formally, a communique. There'll be expectations and ambitions for new and meaningful commitments. And by using the word summit, we're indicating that we have a high level of ambition of what we want to achieve. History shows that ambition can sometimes be unrealistic. Ultimately, a summit is just another word for a meeting, a milestone on a much longer journey, a chance to come together to discuss and share ideas and seek outcomes. To make change happen, to enable the most successful summit, we need to understand the 4 Ps: process, politics, policies, and people. And then process again. Process bookends first and last. It's the spine that runs through everything that we do. A successful summit is much more likely if we create an effective process. On so many occasions, there's not enough time that's given to thinking about the process. Both on the day itself and crucially in the time afterwards. The 4 Ps are intimately linked. Understanding how and why they're linked and seeking to influence each of them is like a multi-dimensional game of chess. Process begins with a range of initiating questions. What's the big idea? Why does the world need it? Who needs to be involved to deliver it? Who are our stakeholders and what influences them? What is the data? Why should anyone invest in our idea? And ultimately, what would success look like? I've been involved in a number of United Nations summits. They are mandated by UN General Assembly resolutions and for the most part are political, not financial negotiations, even when finance is in the title. It's rare that the UN will take on an issue and lobby member states to financially contribute. Every woman, every child was an exception. In 2010, we raised $40 billion for maternal health. $40 billion. When we started the process, we did not know that it would end with a Secretary General led summit, success crept up on us. The summit was a culmination of a 3-year campaign taking a serious look at the financing of maternal health. The process began by identifying the problem. The Millennium Development Goal for Health was seriously off track. Maternal health indicators were dire. In countries like Nigeria, women died in pregnancy or childbirth at double the rate of the United Kingdom in the 1840s. The UK Prime Minister, Gordon Brown, brought together a group of politicians and leaders to ask 2 big questions. How much would it cost to strengthen maternal health systems, and where would the money come from? The great and good of the health world noodled over these questions for a year. They developed analyses, policy papers, published reports, speeches. They brought clarity to the issues, but not the funds required to deliver them. The United Nations, led by Ban Ki-moon, saw the initial groundwork had been launched, and he decided to take this on and launch Every Woman, Every Child. Governments had to identify solutions for their countries and make provision in their budgets. Yes, there was a role for international development assistance, but the responsibility for delivery was with the countries themselves. A majority of UN member states took up the challenge. They wanted their efforts on maternal health to be recognized. The United Nations Secretary General created a platform. Leaders were able to share their commitments, and he subtly shone a spotlight on those who were absent. Women dying in childbirth was not a vote winner. Though the process developed organically, we got most of the stage posts right. Know the issue, crowd in others on the journey of discovery, and arrive at solutions together. Create a forum where everyone can share success. And because things often take longer than you think, always be prepared to recalibrate the journey if the destination is still not in sight. After process, there's politics. In my career, I've had a wide range of job titles. Never Sherpa, though, like that. Campaigner, strategist, negotiator. However, if I want to be pigeonholed, I call myself an economist. The economy is the lens through which I view the world. And economics without politics is meaningless. Politicians who don't understand their constituencies put in place the wrong policies, and they lose elections. Simple, but true. When we went to the G20 London Summit, I don't know if you remember, the world was in a financial crisis and the banking sector was in free fall. This is 2009. Trade facilities and export credit guarantees had dried up. The poorest countries in the world knew it would be bad for them, but nobody knew where the fallout would land. There are a few times in history where the world truly comes together, determined to find collective solutions. The global financial crisis shook the very foundations of the global economic system. The shared challenges, though, did not make that negotiation straightforward. But there was never any doubt that the negotiations were essential. Political negotiations are rarely straight quid pro quo. One side will inevitably hold more power than another. My role was to negotiate the deal for the least developed countries, for the poorest countries, and to gain a mandate from African leaders for the UK Prime Minister. For that G20, we had a strategy, but very little time, 3 months. We would cook an idea during the day, a new trade facility, for example, and we would need to bake it overnight, send it in a telegram to G20 capitals. And we'd wait the next day to see as the responses came in. Some ideas rose like the sale of IMF gold, and some fell, like social protection programs. Financing decisions rarely sit within a sector itself. If it's a question of reallocating resources within a sector, sometimes ministers of finance and education are able to do that. But let's be clear, ministers of finance have more power. They need to consider the entirety of an economy. Making the economic case for investment will always be important. How will the decision affect the long-term economic outlook for a country? We raised $1 trillion at that summit. $1 trillion, crazy number. We will never have the counterfactual. What if we'd failed? But I believe that things would have been many times worse. We had a sophisticated strategy, a wide menu of options, the entire diplomatic machinery of the Foreign Office and the government at our disposal. And crucially, the political will of the G20 member states to come to an agreement. Now let's turn to policies. This encapsulates a collection of ideas and plans for action. They're mostly formulated in response to a particular set of issues, challenges, or problems. And their ambition is often to alleviate, mitigate, or make a landmark change. There are a number of key areas we need to consider when we're proposing policies. Firstly, have we properly identified the problems and the solutions? In the developing world, we see lots of what economists call market failures, where solutions that will be developed and deployed elsewhere are often not invested in because, it's something that poor people just wouldn't be able to afford. Secondly, what's the broader context? Why should a government invest in health or education? How will this investment impact the economy, the community, and the individual? And thirdly, how do we give focus to an issue so that it resonates politically or is easier to explain? Let me give you another example. The Global Partnership for Education is the largest dedicated fund for education in the world. I've run 3 of their financing summits in Copenhagen, Brussels, and Dakar in Senegal. Prior to 2011, GPE had been known as the Education for All Fast Track Initiative. Clearly an ironic name. It was never fast and it was rarely on track. We changed the name, launching the Global Partnership for Education in UN General Assembly in UNGA that year. And Denmark agreed to host our first replenishment. We had less than a month of political capital to play with, so our policies had to be crisp, upfront, and immediate winners. Unfortunately, our data was weak, and our policies weren't persuasive enough. And whilst we can say that we accomplished a successful rebrand of GPE, we fell short of our financing target. The European Union, hosted GPE's Brussels summit in 2014, but had bigger issues on their agenda, the conflict in Syria, for example. They did very little in support of GPE. One always assumes that the host will pull their weight, and this can be a bold assumption. By the 3rd replenishment in 2018, we had finally got into our groove. We knew which policies needed to be in place and when. Our new board chair, former Australian Prime Minister Julia Gillard, opened doors wherever she went. President Macron and President Sall of Senegal worked the phones and pulled in attendance at the very highest levels. And while security implications prevented us from telling people that Rihanna was coming to Dakar, she worked her millions of followers. The venue nearly exploded when people knew that she was there, and we trended on Twitter at a time when it was meaningful to do so. GPE peaked at the third attempt. GPE's policies convinced a wide range of countries that investment in education at the national level was necessary, beneficial, and inevitable. Any policy needs cheerleaders, individuals who are prepared to champion them, fuel ideas and actions, and give support and momentum. In recent years, the architects of change, the modern revolutionaries, have been the middle classes. Yes, educated, yes, concerned, and yes, connected. But also, they don't have to worry about the fundamentals of putting food on the table each night. All campaigns have to situate their asks in the political and economic realities of their circumstance. Whatever we think about polarization and populism and post-truth in today's politics, most, if not all, successful campaigns are making the case to the people in power, whether they think they are or not. In the end, the only way to get positive results from process, politics, and policies will involve people. Creating a successful summit with meaningful outcomes is not a theoretical game. There are reasons why you can't just open up a manual and do it. Ultimately, it's about people, their passion, their vision for change, their willingness to engage in the process and be guided along unfamiliar pathways. Getting to know the key people, and in turn, their people and advisors, takes time. There are rarely shortcuts to building relationships. The process requires trust. Trust that we have the right idea, trust that we have the right analysis and data, trust that we have assessed the risk to our reputation and the risk of doing nothing, and that the risks of taking action are worth it. Many people have experienced developing one aspect of a summit, the politics, the policies, the actual summit production, perhaps, but few will have seen it from all sides, seen how it comes together, and recognize when it isn't. Trusting the person charged with advising the entirety of a summit is not always easy, but for a truly successful summit, it's essential. One final example. In 2023, I worked on the Africa Climate Summit. It was hosted by the government of Kenya and the African Union. My team were brought in 3 months before the summit. The president had decided that his team were not performing. We pulled off something amazing. 22 heads of state attended, $26 billion was raised. A new narrative voiced by Africans for their continent. But it was hard. There was insufficient time to plan. Governance structures were chaotic. Decisions were poorly communicated and frequently reversed. I work with some people who were extraordinary, and I work with some extraordinarily difficult people. The outcomes of the summit were incredible, but it should not have been so hard. All summits in their final weeks follow a similar battle rhythm. After all, it is a campaign. Fail to plan for this, and everyone suffers. The truncated timeline and the cultural challenges of working in Africa meant we were continually assessing every relationship. Who is applying pressure on whom? Can these people do what they say they can do? And who can you trust? In these instances, you have to be really clear about what you want, clear about who can help you, and clear about whether someone can do what they say they can do. You have to know who the decision maker is, who they listen to, and who might get in your way. Ultimately, success requires clarity of mission, vision for how you will achieve it, and the right timing. And the power of what I do is that people don't really know that I do it. When they look at a summit, they sort of assume that it somehow came together. And summits need that. The feeling that they're organic, the feeling that the timing is right, the feeling that the synchronicity of narrative and objective have collided to make a summit inevitable. So, if you ever think about holding a summit, make sure that you know why the world needs it. Make sure that you have mapped out all the many potential routes to get there. And remember, the timing needs to be right, but it doesn't need to be perfect. Thank you.
Sarah, thank you. Absolutely brilliant. I just kept reminding myself as you were speaking how lucky we are to have you not just with us in Nepal, but working with the IPB. It's absolutely brilliant. Thank you. Sarah Beeching, everybody. Thank you. So listening to all of that, and I want to know what's going on in the minds of our four keynote listeners. Anna, do you mind if I pick on you? I suppose the questions I'm wondering are, what was going through your mind as you were listening? What stood out? What were your questions? Over to you.
Thank you. I really thought that it was great to see sort of like examples of the successful summits, and then also maybe the educational one that took 3 summits to become successful. What struck me was obviously the impactful ones that got all the financial backing, the maternal child one, as well as the last one about the economic crisis. Those were catastrophe situations. It was painted like women were dying. And then the other one was like, you know, the whole global economy is crashing, you know, everybody is losing jobs, you know, and sort of jumping off buildings, right? I mean, in our eye health sector, we know the problem. Obviously, we have WHO mandates and things like that. A lot of it is statistics. Are we painting the catastrophe well enough? Is what I'm asking.
That sense
Maybe
of urgency.
We should go down to look at if we don't achieve what we're happening. Let's paint an alternate reality of what could happen in 2030 when insight has no sight. You know, I mean, that to me may make people want to act more. And the other thing I think that struck me was also this whole idea of people and understanding relationships and how political will is built. And I think, you know, understanding also maybe mindsets of politicians being in power only for the term that they're in term for and needing quick wins, right? And if there are quick wins that we can offer them, that other countries have examples of already being done, maybe the quick wins is also for the first summit, especially since we're starting and we don't know how long it takes us to be successful, hopefully the first one, but maybe quick wins would be also an area of focus. So these are the 2.
This is excellent. Thank you, Anna. And by the way, let's imagine a situation where you go to your colleagues, your ophthalmologist colleagues, and you say, this summit, this series of events is going to be good for us, and here's why. What would you like to be saying to them? What would it take for you to know that this was a really good thing for them? What would you want to be saying to them?
I would say that, you know, as ophthalmologists, oftentimes we are at the forefront of providing this care, and we are all conscious, even in private practice or in public practice, that resources are limited. Funding is limited, be it through insurance, through public funding, government funding. And I think to mandate something in the level of the governmental level to then have financing and backing behind it to give us more resources to provide the care that we know people need. I think that is the value of what I would tell my fellow ophthalmologists to get on board and get their influences going to get this happening.
Excellent. Thank you. Jonathan. And we've got to
I've got one. So much fascinating stuff in there. I really want to focus on one of the P's, which is people. And I want to kind of consider the kinds of successes that we've had in Australia and how I've seen policy and advocacy work in my country, in terms of how we could make the summit work. Now, in Australia, we often kind of get ambassadors to help us in eye health causes, and that can be successful. So people at the top are really important. Rihanna was a good pull. As you know, recently watching Elton John was talking about having some eye health problems, and I was chucking stuff at the TV interviewer. Why aren't you asking about his diagnosis? I really need to know Elton John's visual acuity, please. But I think what I want to talk about is actually that stories are important, people are important, from the bottom as well as the top, because we are going to have to make this summit work successfully, we are going to have to get people and politicians involved from countries. So we are going to have to work in our own countries to campaign for politicians to care about this summit, to get people to want to attend. And politicians want to see that voters care about these issues. So one of the things that I would really challenge people to think about is, how can you get patients involved in the conversations with politicians? Every story counts, but are those stories being counted in our advocacy to politicians and in our policy making as much as they are being counted in our comms out into the world?
Thank you, Jonathan. You have some elections coming up in Australia. You must have been thinking over the past couple of days, as you always do, how do we get eye health up the political agenda? What's your advice to your peers in Australia about how to do that? And by the way, particularly bearing in mind what Sarah's been saying about the power of summits to boot it up the agenda.
Yeah, I think that Australia, you know, is like eye health is very good in Australia. We, you know, have some of the best eye health services available in the world if you live in a capital city. But we are also the only developed country not to have eliminated trachoma, and that is particularly affecting Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. And I think that to get eye health up on the agenda in a very competitive kind of environment, as we've been talking about throughout this summit, I think one of the key things is to think about where each country sits on the world stage and how we could increase our esteem and, you know, in the eyes of the world.
Yeah, thank you, Jonathan. Anil, let's get some of your reflections, please.
Okay, thank you, Oli. Thank you, Sarah, for nice presentations. So it is a global summit on eye health. But when I listened carefully, I did not hear any eye care word in the whole entire presentations. But some of the things that I noticed, it's 4 Ps. And started with the process and it ends with the people. So what I like to say about, yes, indeed, in eye health, we need a global summit, definitely. And then, as yesterday we observed that our Prime Minister, Right Honorable, was already there, so it is easy for us to say that our commitment from those summit, the head of the states will be there. But something like that, when we see about those, as Sarah said, about the maternity health, we are talking about the summit and eye health. That is not the disease focus. Eye health, then we need to plan it for eye health issues are forever. It will remain forever. So we need to plan for forever. Anything that we do, then it has to be. So this is one of the issues. And as Sarah says that out of the 4P, one is the people. Eye care, when we had this 2030 insight strategy, it's a people-centered eye care. We put it already in the front. And there is also commitment, so something like we have an IPEC that is also people-centric, and there is a elevated, integrated, and elevation, all this. But my things, just what I heard it, all these things is, all these are the good. We need the eyecare global summit, eye health. But something challenges, I feel like I belongs from Nepal. As you know, that's developing countries. And then we are very politically instability. So the challenges will be always the finance, okay? And then having this commitment, holding this global summit, we have a commitment, though it's just endorsed by the government, okay, head of the step, but how to monitor it. So there, I would like to bring these issues for the next session as well, and who will do the follow-up?
Yes.
Like us, NGOs over here, mostly we are the NGOs. So how we collaborate, how we learn, and how we lead, these kind of things we need to talk as well when we say about the Global Eye Health Summit. Okay.
And apart from funding, for you to be thinking about a summit and saying that was a success, what would need to have happened?
Definitely. Any summits, it's already said that it is a head of the states, but only the things is politicians in my country, I will put the example of my country, we have a lot of prime ministers in this 40 times the government has changed in these last 17 years. So only we focus with the politicians will be difficult to think. So we also need the bureaucrats who will be in the Ministry of Health, Ministry of Finance. So they will be the long-term, our partner, our implementers to take it further.
Yeah, that continuity, that long-term
continuity
thinking.
of this. Then it is, I already said that it's, we need to work together, all the stakeholders need to do together, not only the politicians, okay?
Yeah, thank you, Neil. Kayo.
Hi. Thank you, Sarah, for the presentation, and now my colleagues here for their feedbacks. I think that talking about the summit is more about talking people and the politicians, in my view. And I just said we need to not guarantee, but show a quick win. So I think we are fighting for a cause that is really relevant. Like eyecare, it's not something that can kill, and it's not so, people don't see so much urgency to give assistance, but in the end of the day, we can cause a really big impact when we make a cross-sector about education, financial. So if we can show this impact that we can cause in a long term for the politicians, probably are gonna receive their attention. When you take like, and not speaking here as a institution, but a person. Here we are all passionate about the cause, and so it's really hard to talk about that with, again, like between us, because we are passionate. But when we talk about anyone and say, okay, if you lose your sight, how is going to be your life? No one's understand that until they lost their vision. So how important it is that, and how cheap it is to save this sight for so many people. It's not so expensive. So I think that is the main point. And the second one, I think, when we talk about people and what we are trying to bring in this global summit, is about culture. If we make a culture change and explain for the population what we are trying to do and how important it is this vision, the value of that, we can really make the mind change of everybody, and then the population, like the politicians, going to understand. I think it's like a top bottom. So show the quick wins, show the numbers, show the impact, show the revenue of the governments with taxes and people coming back to the market, but show the population, the bottom, how this is important, like the sight and the vision, and how this, like it's how can I say, it's our patrimony, like.
Yes. And so, Kayo, you're also, you're an entrepreneur. So for companies, how would we make sure that they're not thinking, oh, they're having a summit over there, it's not for us? What was going through what goes through your mind as we talk about that challenge of engaging everybody across sectors?
That's really crazy, but I have a actual example that we faced in Brazil a year and a half ago. We should make this environment a win-win-win. The government needs to understand that they are going to win. People and organizations, the third sector, need to understand they are going to win, and the politicians as a first sector need to understand they are going to win. And how do we make that?
Yes.
I think when we put everybody in the same table and explain how they are going to connect, that's really, really worth it. Like, if I have like 10 minutes, sorry, 10 seconds to explain. Sorry for my Brazilian English. But we faced in Brazil a situation that we put the private sector financing a small project, and then we take this project, show to the government, and say, look the impact. And then they make that a public policy in São Paulo. So we scale up for like almost 20 times the project, but we put everybody together, and everybody won.
Yeah,
so that's, I think, put effort together and show the results for everybody.
Yeah, and that value exchange between them. Right. Final question, just very briefly for you all. If you were involved, and by the way, you are, everybody in this room is involved in shaping a global eye health summit. And I am putting you on the spot here. We've not rehearsed this at all. Please complete the phrase, please make sure. Please make sure. Jonathan, I'm going to come to you first.
Please make sure that people are always part of processes, politics, and policies.
Hear, hear. Thank you, Jonathan. Anna.
Please make sure that the right stakeholders in every step of the process are involved in planning the process.
Yeah, people-centered design, absolutely. Thank you. Okay.
Please make sure that everybody involved understand the value about the fight that we are going.
Yeah, it's such a great point, and we've got, in the broadest sense, an investment case session later on that, but thank you for using that word, value. Anil.
Okay, please make sure that we put the people on center, focused with our monitoring the things that what we commit. So,
thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Anil, and thank you again to Sarah for stimulating such a great conversation, but mostly to all four of you. Thank you very much indeed. Well, let's please make sure that we get everybody else's views in here. Why don't you turn to the person next to you and just reflect on what we've heard so far, because in 1 minute I'll introduce you to our next guests on the stage. So maybe reflect with your neighbor for a minute, and then we'll go into the next part of our discussion. Thank you. Thank you, Anil. Thank you. Okay, everybody, welcome back. Okay, so this is all about, as you know, moving towards a global summit on eye health, and this is about how everyone can get involved. So Sarah, thank you for rejoining us, and there's lots of threads to pick up, but I will come back to you. You will recognize our guests on the stage, but just let me remind you, Amanda Davis, Fiona Lawless, Ella Goodwin, and Katie Overby. Let's give them all welcome to the stage. Thank you very much. And why don't we just go quickly down the order in terms of the hat that you've been wearing in sort of summit land, particularly the bit of the puzzle, if you like, that you've been helping us to think about. If we just run down, and that'll give us a sense, because my question to each is going to be the same, which is how do we get involved? Okay, but Amanda.
So my role has been in the political institution and engagement group. And so what that means is working with our regional leaders for IPB and their key influencers within the national level as well. So there's a committee that I'm leading for IPB.
Right, so the political and institutional engagement group. So just so I'm clear, forgive the ignorance question, so when it comes to how we would engage with, let's say, a head of state, is that coming through your group in that sense?
Yeah, so we're sort of pulling that higher level strategy together based on the inputs from all of our key leaders.
Super helpful. Yeah, thank you. Fiona.
So I've been supporting the Policy and Legacy Committee. So that's working around developing policy asks that we will ask governments to make at the summit, and then also looking at how we monitor progress towards those commitments afterwards.
Yeah, got it. Thank you. Katie.
Thank you. I am chairing the Summit Program Committee, and the Summit Program Committee is actually made up of the leads of all of the other committees. We're working together to ensure that we are engaging the right stakeholders at the right time and tasked with the overall strategy and delivery of the summit.
And it's worth just staying with you for a second, Katie, because I don't want to misinterpret that as being what happens on a day itself. It's much broader. Just give us a sense of the breadth that you're talking about there.
Actually, Ali, I'm so glad you asked that, because let me first just go back to Ambassador Webson's words, which we all heard this morning, which is that this is about turning words on paper into action for people. So our goal, our success, is not to hold a meeting. That is a tool, but actually what we're really trying to drive for, what we want as a success, is to engage the right stakeholders, to influence people at all the levels in order to actually move forward with the policies and the understanding that we want in order to move our sector forward. And so that will happen not just on one day. That will happen through a campaign throughout the coming months.
Of those different points. Thank you. Ella.
I have been listening and learning and feeling ever more encouraged every time I learn more, and thinking about how are we going to pay for this thing, because it doesn't come for free. And so how are we going to fundraise from our sector, from those who we hope to engage outside of eye health, in livelihoods, education, road safety, the financial world, et cetera. And looking forward to thinking through that with all of you.
And just so we understand, Ella, in terms of the dimension, and Sarah talked a lot about this, of how the summit or summits themselves might be a leverage for funding, is that something you've also been asked to start thinking about, or is that across everybody to think about?
Shall I? Money follows momentum. Who fundraises in here? Okay, good. So money follows momentum, and we talked about participation. The idea is for a stakeholder group. So our first stakeholder group is obviously the communities we're serving, and talking about people. But we are the first stakeholders in the success of this journey, the multiple points of interaction that get us to the summit. And we have a really important moment coming up in September at the UN General Assembly, when we're going to be presenting the investment case as a community. And there's an opportunity here to think about how we as a community get involved with fundraising and using these moments to build momentum.
Right, so we'll come back to that when I ask you how we can get involved and so on and so forth, right? But just before, and actually I'll start with you, Fiona, on how we can get involved. But Sarah, can I ask you to just grab the mic for a second, because you're on fantastic on your headset, perfect. Because you have seen lots of different industries over time limbering up, if I can put it like that, beginning these processes, which began, a long time ago. Some of your reflections, having spent some time with colleagues over the last couple of days, just be as pithy as you like, but I'd just like to get that sense, given how well traveled you are on this.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose a couple of really important reflections that I've had. I first really got to know this sector a little bit in about 2017-18, when actually I had the first discussions with people about it, and they said, we really want to have a summit. And I said to them at that point, have you got a UN resolution and a World Health Assembly resolution about eye health? And it didn't exist. And I remember very clearly saying, go away and get it. It will be hard, but get it, and then come back and talk to me. You need to have the tent poles in place before you can put the scaffolding up, before you can actually generate the impact that you're looking for. And those tent poles are now in place. Governments have made commitments, and they now need to put those into action. So I think that would be my biggest reflection.
Thank you, Sarah. Right, so here's the question. How do we get involved? And by the way, as soon as we've started to hear that, we'll move into questions very much under the banner of Ask Me Anything. So let's keep it nice and broad. Right, Fiona, how do we get involved?
Well, I guess from the policy perspective, the policy framework and the document that we will be using to present to governments is in its final stages, and we will be holding a members' meeting to show all of the IPB members what is in these documents and talk about next steps. The policy framework will also be launched at the World Health Assembly at the end of May. So a real key step is to engage with those two processes. You can see what's being discussed, what we're going to be talking to governments about, and then it will be how we talk to governments at a national, global and regional level.
And in terms of you being surrounded by the people you want around that table, anyone else you want that you're putting out a call to say we need more of this or that, in terms of let's use this as the bat signal?
So we have a really great and really engaged committee who will be reaching out to some key stakeholders within the IUPB community to get some feedback on what we have drafted so far. And particularly in relation to specific commitments that we will be presenting to governments for them to select from. Right. But there will be outreach to people within the IPB community, and then, like I said, we will have that broader kind of discussion around it at the members' meeting.
Thank you. And other than you, Fiona, any other colleagues that we should be thinking about in terms of having those conversations here in Nepal?
So there is a number of members from the Policy and Legacy Committee here, and then also I guess we would want to be thinking about how you can engage with that sort of policy and advocacy. So things around the master classes that have been being held, and also around the investment case discussion that's happening later on today, because it's all interlinked.
Great, so that investment case discussion on this stage this afternoon. Thank you, Fiona. Katie, and then Amanda. Thank you. There we go.
So Ollie, I think I would actually encourage and invite all of you to get involved by, first of all, asking as many questions as you can. We will be working to ensure that we have regular communication so that people feel that they have the information. Now, to be clear, this is definitely a process. I've been so impressed already, as we've come together to see the momentum that's already happened and the progress that has already been made. But this is still a process, and it's probably going to be a messy one. We will be trying to communicate and bring people along as we can. And I would ask you to, if you have an interest, if you have an idea, reach out to, they're probably going to hate me for this, but reach out to any of my colleagues or myself. And we'll look for ways, because I believe that the success of this effort and this campaign really relies on all of us coming together, sharing our expertise, sharing our passion, and quite frankly, not so much as individual organizations, but as one united sector.
And what's the closest we've got to sort of an idea box? Because, you know, we don't want sort of just synchronous meetings that we can or cannot make. We want an ongoing harvesting of connections, ideas, and insights, don't we? How can that happen?
That's a wonderful question. One of the committees that's not represented up here on stage is our communications committee. Yep. And that's actually an active conversation we're having right now to ensure that we can both solicit inputs as well as ensure that we're bringing people along as transparently as possible.
Excellent. Thank you. Watch this space. Amanda, how do we get involved?
Yeah, so in a number of ways. So I think as the strength of IPB is, of course, its members and the work that our members do at a national level. To be honest, without that, there is no summit, I don't think, that we could get there. And to use Sarah's analogy about, you know, this is the scaffolding now. We are building the scaffolding and we're building it at that national level. So all of our members who are working at national levels, they're working with patient groups, they're working with professional organizations, they're engaging with government representatives. That's where there will be an involvement. Yeah. Now that will be led through a process, one of those Ps, but that is where we need to activate our membership for their strengths. The second picks up on Kayo's point around the people and politics and what matters. And we have a fantastic activation system in World Sight Day, Love Your Eyes. We have a campaign already, and that will be more and more focused on the direct outcomes of the summit, and all of that messaging will be aligned. Yep. And that is a way our members already engage, but it will be far more direct engagement and messaging going forward. And then the third thing I would say is the investment case, the policy framework, understanding where this is going beyond the summit is critical for all our members. It's critical that we're all speaking that same language, that we understand what are the commitments that we're asking for. When we understand the value of that and we understand how to articulate the value through work like the investment case. So that's why I think the three key areas where they'll be involved.
Thank you. Ella, how do we get involved?
So I want to pick up something that Peter had said in his remarks in the last session, which was, if we don't advocate for eye health, who will? And it's a little bit like that with the summit and the journey that we're on. If we don't advocate and share our enthusiasm for what's possible at the summit and on the road to the summit, then who will? And so people give with their hearts and they give with their minds. I'm going to reference the comms committee, even though they're not up here. So one of the things that we're going to be thinking about is how do we build this momentum starting here within the membership? So the best chance of success, not guaranteed success, is enthusiastic participation from the members. Mm-hmm. And from a fundraising point of view, the way to think about that, now don't get nervous, because when we talk about money, I can feel people be like, oh no, I don't have to, I'm gonna open my wallet. That's not where we start. We don't start with opening wallets. We start with the enthusiasm for the cause, and then we can think about how we can give and how we can get. And so what we're gonna wanna do is, with the comms committee, is create a communications package that can be shared so that you can share it with your leadership, you can share it with those in your ecosystem, you can share it with others to be able to evangelize for this idea and what we're going to make possible.
Yeah. Because Sarah, that's part of signaling the stakeholders are invested in multiple ways. Just a brief reflection on that conceptually, because Ella makes a powerful case there.
And it's really important, and it's incredibly difficult. And I can take the example of the education sector, where you have a multitude of different partners who are all invested in different parts of education, whether it's on the teaching side, the learning side, girls' education, construction of schools, a whole different gamut of it. And we invited them to all come together collectively behind a process that was going to lead us to education summits. And the same is true of other sectors. Even if there's just a short period of time where you say we're going to put our own institutional interest on the back burner and have a core of messages that we're all going to agree on. It's really, really important.
That sense that you've got that support. Maria, tuning in online, says funding support is critical. Right, double underline. Ask me anything is the next section. So you be as pithy as you like, as blunt as you like. I'd really like to put this team through their paces, if I'm being honest. But please raise a hand or chime in online as well. I see you there, just in about the 5th row back, and then we'll go behind you as well. Feel free to say who you are, where you're from. You don't have to. Thank you. And feel free to direct your question at the whole group or at one person if you like, whatever.
Is this right? Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you so much. My name is Kristin Skjæret. I work with the Norwegian Association of the Blind and Partially Sighted. We are a member of IEPB, but we're also a member of the World Blind Union. And first of all, I'm very enthusiastic about the summit, and I look forward to engage, and I look forward to getting your guidance on how we can get the Norwegian government aboard. But I'm also a little bit concerned of how we are going to do the campaign and how it's going to be the messaging. Because where we live, what we work with in Norway is really to combat stigma about the people who have already lost vision. And we know in our Norwegian community, people do not get sufficient education, they do not get sufficient access to work, and a lot of this is because people do not think the blind can do anything. Mm-hmm. So we really need to be careful that we're not adding on to increased stigma,
yes,
but that we are reducing the stigma.
Yeah, helpful.
Thank you.
And I'll ask whoever would like to respond, but I will get another question. Thank you, Simon.
Chundak Tenzing, Medical Director for Seva Foundation. I just wanted to get a clarification about that eye. How do I get involved? Eye is representative of whom? Are we talking about the underserved populations? Are they coming there to the table? And what are they going to do? Who are they? So that is an important criteria, I think, yeah, for this to be successful.
Great pair of questions. Thank you. Who would like to start? Go, Amanda.
I think it's not I, it's we. And I think to your point around, being a member of the World Blind Union, for example, and bringing in those perspectives is absolutely critical. So I would think, just as an example, in Norway, where you're engaging with your stakeholders, that you're making sure that we have people who are permanently blind, their voice is being heard as this is being discussed. And on a very practical level, we have Azra here, who is the new regional chair for Europe, and she will be engaging at literally country by country level to start to identify who are the key stakeholders. And you would be a key stakeholder, for example, and then you bring in the voices of the people you represent to ensure that that messaging is getting across. So that's just a very sort of practical way of how this will actually play out.
Yeah, on this first question, very interesting question on sensitivity. Any reflection on that?
So first of all, I think it's an excellent question, actually both, because, if I go back to the 4 Ps and we think about people, and we've talked about ensuring, and Jack talked about ensuring that we're bringing the right people along in this process and we're bringing these stories to life, it's really important that that's not coming from us. This is coming from the people who have the lived experience. And we want to make sure that everything we're doing with this process, it's not about the limitations, it's about the potential and how together we all unlock that potential.
Yeah. Now, in the interest of time, I'm going to urge us, as you were, Katie, and everyone, to be pithier on questions and answers so we get a few more in. Azra, I think there was a question from you or a build, and please show your hand and then we can come to you next. Azra.
I just wanted to answer your question, or actually I very much value your feedback, because in Europe I think one of the problems is there is not a lot of awareness about the importance of vision and the impact it has once you don't have it anymore. And I think the patient voice would really need to be heard. And so I would very much like to connect with you on that.
Yeah, thank you, Azra. If you raise your hand, yes, let's go towards just on the other side of the doors. By the way, thank you to our online, one of our online guests here. I am the editor-in-chief of the Community Eye Health Journal and pledge our support. We will do everything we can to help build support and momentum leading up to the summit. That is really meaningful. Thank you very much indeed for that. Question. Hello, Jeff.
Yeah, my question's for Fiona. I'm Jeff Todd with Prevent Blindness out of the U.S. I guess it's a question and an ask kind of combined. As you're thinking about policy, a lot of us are already working in policy in our countries. And, you know, I want to make sure that whatever policy agenda that we come around with for the summit doesn't come in conflict with the work that we're trying to do in our country. And if there is stuff we're doing in our country, I'm hopeful that the summit will help push it over the line.
Really interesting. And then Fiona, I'll let you come in, of course. Jeff, any particular red flag or watch out, any piece of advice?
I don't have any red flags per se. It's just, you know, I'm thinking about some of the work we're doing and how sensitive it is, and particularly in the US right now. And the last thing I want to do is have an agenda come in that may take the attention elsewhere. And I don't think this is going to.
Got it.
I'm just
Thank
imagining
you.
that'll be something other people are worried about.
Thank you. And forgive me for asking briefly, Fiona. Thank you.
I'll keep it as brief as I can.
Yeah.
Thanks for your question, and a tricky question. What I have been saying to people when they've asked about the policy framework is you're not going to be surprised about it. It's not, there's going to be things that we talk about on a daily basis in there. And like Sarah said, we have a resolution on vision, we have a World Health Assembly resolution, we have an UNGA resolution on it. We're building on that. But also it links to what Amanda was saying about how it's going to be the people like you at national level who are going to operationalise it, and it's not going to be that we will hand you this list and be like, you have to advocate for all of these asks. That's not how it's going to work. There's going to be a narrative document which will talk about how eye health is important across the life course for every age group. And then there will also be some sample commitments that governments could make. And that's where you come in at the national level. So it's not that there will be set exact ones. There will be themes, but there won't be set exact ones. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Fiona. I can see Kaio's hand, and I'm looking out across the auditorium. If you raise your hand, thank you. Kaio.
Hi, and sorry to take the attention again, but I just want to make a reflection, and for all of you for their organization in leading the Global Summit. I think now that we talked so much about it, if you understand and link it with Jeff said, we are not more talking about what anyone are doing in each country, but what we are trying to make global. So I'm open, and I think everybody here is open to put like the best quality. Like Ella is in the part of fundraising, probably she's one of the best here that we have in APB to lead this. So we can see as a team, like we have the best players in the world in this segment, in the eye care segment. So we have we need to understand which one and make all the panels and what we are going to speak using the best resource that we have. But we are not talking about any more institution. Next year is not about institutions. It's about what we can do for this goal and for this mission, like everybody together for the same results.
Thank you, Kai. Yes, that's right. This is the Harlem Globetrotters of eye health, and 3 pointers all round. Other questions? Right at the back. Thank you very much. Welcome. Oh, we're just coming up to you there. And if you raise your hand, we've got about 6 or 7 minutes, maybe granted a few more, so now's the time.
Yeah,
welcome.
Good morning. My name is Rafael Ogola, Okum Yakwarokum Ogola Rabai, Wodugenyo Kewa Lego Komenya. I work with one site, Esido Laxotica Foundation. All are long names. So my question is, when I look at that particular state, I look at that leadership, I really commend that very well. Sometimes I was willing to volunteer myself to sit there to balance the gender. Why I'm talking about leadership is because sensitivity when we are driving policy based on the cultural context where I'm coming from, sometimes our own gender is also a barrier to the people we are communicating to. So are we able to build, maybe for this is an exception, but when we look back, what is the leadership that is driving agenda based on the culture?
Thank you. We'll get a brief reflection. Katie.
So first of all, thank you, because that's a really important point. And I just want to emphasize that regardless of what you see up here on the stage, that there is a very diverse and inclusive set of leaders in all of these committees, representing all of the regions, all genders. But again, this is why it's so important that we can engage with all of you to make sure that we're hearing different perspectives and we're integrating that into the strategies and ultimately what we're trying to deliver.
Yes.
So thank you for highlighting that.
Thank you, Katie.
Can I just also build up on,
please, of course, Ella, please.
So one, thank you, but also I'm going to actually say that Caroline Casey is really the ringer on the fundraising. So I think we could take a master class from her. I want to just say, just really particularly, what one of the asks is of us is that right now, budgets are being worked out and being developed, and big budget envelopes will arrive. In the interim, we need to build a nest egg. And we're looking to build a nest egg that's in the zone of sort of 1.5 million that would come from our community. And we already have organizations that have already committed $500,000. So we're a third is already on the table. So one, I want to give a thanks to the organizations who came forward early, because they're the ones who really got us seated here. I am going to confess, well, let me know before I confess anything. Let me first just ask, who's feeling enthusiastic? Okay, so like we're kind of like we've got like 2/3. Who's feeling concerned? Okay, good. Okay, so I think here's the thing. One of the most important things is that we surface the concerns and objections and we get them out on the table, because if we have them amongst ourselves, we're going to encounter them outside anybody else that we're talking to, getting them on the bus with us.
Yes.
So what I really encourage is, if you have concerns and ask any of us or anybody else who's involved, because it will only make our case stronger. Otherwise, the concerns are going to be doing push-ups in the corner, and they will come and fly in our faces later. Now, the confession is that Vision Spring was not in the first 500,000. So, first of all, I'm going to commit Vision Spring right now to being part of the next million. And my question is, how else can we get to this next million by the UN General Assembly as a moment to demonstrate momentum?
Yes.
So if you would like to get involved, whether it's organizationally, it can be $50, it can be $500, it can be $50,000. The dollar amount doesn't matter. It's as much participation as we can demonstrate. So come chat with me after.
Thank you. Excellent. Let's go right to the back. If there's any consolation, I've been cultivating the vibe of concerned enthusiasm for years, and it really can coexist. Right at the back, Simon.
Thank you. Question for Sarah Beeching. Katie had talked about how we're on a journey here, and the summit is a moment. I'm interested to know, looking back at the previous summits that you've worked on, and looking at the post-summit success, if you have any lessons, or if there are any particular elements that were in place which kind of contributed to summits being successful after the fact, which we ought to be paying attention to and perhaps designing into our journey and what it is we do in the lead up. Thank you.
Who would like to have a go?
I think that was to me.
Forgive me. Thank you, Sarah.
That's a fantastic question. What I would say is, if you're not concerned now, we're not being ambitious enough. Okay? So when we're really ambitious about something, of course, that is a little bit scary. There are so many lessons that actually come from how do you create the right, let's call it an accountability framework that you can then hold those who make commitments, be they governments or institutions, to account. I'm going to point to actually a very successful one, the leader of the organization sat in the room here actually, Sight Savers, with the work that Uniting to Combat NTDs did with regards to the accountability matrix for the work they've done on neglected tropical diseases, is a really good framework. Yeah. And that builds, I'm going to say, because I talked to them when they were building it, on experiences that we've had in the past. This afternoon, because I'm not going to go into detail on this, but this afternoon we'll be talking about the case for investment, and we'll drill down into some more detail, actually, at 3 o'clock, about other cases for investment. And I will drill down a little bit more into the fact that where we haven't succeeded is because we haven't been able to measure success, because we didn't get those systems in place to have a baseline of data and to properly document new commitments.
Yeah. Thank you, Sarah. Great question. Now, we're edging up to time, except we're on the threshold of a lunch break, so hopefully we could continue some conversations over that break. A final question in the middle here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Satish. I represent AT-Scale, which is a global partnership on assistive technology. It's a UN-based agency, and ironically, we were born out of a summit, a global disability summit in 2018. On behalf of AT-Scale, we do commit to make the Global Eye Summit a success. We also make a commitment that at least 35 countries where we are financially supporting, 20 out of them have a vision focus to mobilize the political momentum from those 20 countries. But I have a very ignorant question, and yes, apologies if I missed that. When and where is the summit?
What a great question. I mean, thank you, Mr. Colombo. Just one more thing. I'm not looking at anybody.
Clearly, I drew the special stick here. No, actually, I'm sure that's a question that's on everyone's mind. And the honest answer is, we're still having lots of discussions with host countries. We've really received positive reactions from around the world. I think you may have heard we've already got champion countries in every region, and we do have multiple offers to host the summit, but we're still in those discussions. And the reality is, as Sarah has repeatedly reminded us, is once you have a host country, they actually set the date, and they actually set some of the parameters around the meeting and exactly what it will look like. So certainly we will be guiding it. Obviously, as you've heard, there's a lot of thought that's already taken place and that will continue as far as the strategy and certainly what we're looking for the impact to be. But once we have the host country, we'll have a lot more of those specifics. And as I said before, we'll do our best to make sure that we are continuing to communicate as we know. So thank you.
Thank you, Katie. So we're going to break. Final question, Sarah. There are many metrics for success. Attendance of global leaders, whether that's in politics, business, other than simply making it seem more important, of course, are there any other techniques that you think are just tried and tested? If you want to up that number, here's what to think about, because you have had some incredible numbers of heads of state, for example. How do we increase our odds of success?
Well, look, I think there's a few elements to that. I'm going to actually, before I quite answer that question, I'm going to come back right the way to our earlier panelists who actually said, are we painting the picture of the peril about this issue? And in my sort of outsider view, who's been on an accelerated learning curve, learning from you all about your sector, I would say no, not nearly enough, actually. You're not painting the peril of loss of sight. You're not painting the peril of loss of learning for children. You're not painting the peril of loss of productivity in your economies. And you're not looking at the impact of things like traffic accidents. And our case for investment, and I've seen the sort of methodology underpinning that, is going to come up with some pretty hard-hitting facts. And that is really important. And when you've got those hard-hitting facts, you can take them to your heads of state and government. This is beyond the health sector. You have worked within the health sector. The health sector are an incredibly important vehicle for delivery of solutions, but this is beyond the health sector. And when we go up in our tree, in our cabinets of our governments, I mentioned that our ministers of finance are terribly important, but so are our presidents and prime ministers.
Yeah.
And so the question then is, have we got those quick wins?
Yeah.
And when we've got the quick wins, then the politicians will come. And I think we have them in this sector. And I think the results can be very quick. Everyone, you know, we all know that. And those people who will be supported by this, who may be able to see for the first time in a long time, are also the voters.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. You've given me a look, Fiona.
Just to build a little bit on what Sarah said about the cross-sectoral aspect and how it's beyond the health sector, and just to reassure people that that is being considered within how we're developing the policy discussions and how we're looking at it. We're looking not just at the health sector. Obviously, the health sector is very important, but we have looked at how we talk to the education sector, transport, treasury, Ministry of Social Protection, and all of that.
Yeah.
And I'll just, and similarly, when it comes to commitments, looking at the corporates and the private sector, not just those who are involved in eye health, but those who are involved in all the range of the issues Fiona's just described.
Excellent. Thank you. Final and crucial thanks go to our keynote listeners, to the brilliant Sarah Beeching. Thank you, Sarah, and to our 4 star guests for all the work you're doing, of course, in your day roles, but specifically on this summit, coordinating support, offers, thinking, and all sorts of good energy. Thank you very much indeed, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.